Welcome everyone. My name's Tom Bartnick. I'm the director of the Franco Harris Pittsburgh Center, part of Penn State Outreach. And for those of you who don't know what we do, as part of Outreach, what we do is we look for ways to connect faculty and students with initiatives and opportunities in Pittsburgh, where we're based. And we like to do that to make sure that we are establishing connections and collaborations with our local community partners for both, the purposes of learning and research, and also for the benefits of our region, particularly the community partners that we work with. So. Thank you for joining us today. This series, working with Exus Renewables of North America, um, is called Careers in Action. So this is our second in the series. In December, we had engineers that were joining us to talk about their career exploration and what they do at Exus. And today we are joined by two commercial senior commercial analysts for at Exus, focusing on commercial energy management. And the way that we're going to proceed is we will hear presentations from both Chase Smith and Zach Gorlach, and we'll each go maybe about 15-20 minutes. There'll be some time for questions and answers following each presentation, but we've also reserved time at the end for about 10-15 minutes of conversation. So when it's times for questions, I believe, if you just raise your hand in the chat, you can either ask the questions out loud, or you can also plug your questions into the chat, which Christina will be monitoring because I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. So, all right, without any further ado, I believe we are going to start off with Chase. So Chase, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for joining. Zach and I are going to go kind of back and forth. So we're both on the commercial team. We're both in the back office functions here. We have very similar roles. So we're kind of going to cover both of us at once we get into that section. But we are Exus Renewables North America. Next slide here. So what we do at Exus is, our company owns and operates renewable assets. So we have a lot of wind. I think we're either first or second is what I heard. So one of the largest wind asset owners in Pennsylvania. We have a lot of operational assets that are solar out in New Mexico, and then we have a pretty large development portfolio coming too. But basically, we have, different teams. We handle the operation, the scheduling of energy, development. We're big into repowers for the wind assets, which are basically you take these blades on the turbines, you take them down, you basically put more efficient, better ones on them, and then they can produce more power. So that's kind of a high level overview. But I think the number today is 95 employees. Primarily, most people sit in Pittsburgh. And then we have like legal project finance groups that are in the New York office. And then, like I said, we have our collection of about 10 solar sites out in New Mexico. So we just opened an office there this year. So there's kind of two legs or branches, I'd call it, to our company, and one of them is the asset management side, where it's essentially it's just somebody else owns the asset, and then depending on what we do for them, we have our operations group, we have accounting services, the commercial team, basically, calculating revenue and how do you get somebody else's asset, their renewable asset, to operate most efficiently, and then handle all the reporting from there. So you can see here we have, stuff all over the country. We have a lot of stuff in Texas, a little bit in Canada too, but really presence is everywhere. And there's so many different markets across the country that everything is a little bit similar, but also very, very different. There's a couple nuances to every different ISO that these sit in. And then on the IPP side, so that's the sites that we own. We're an independent power producer. So like I mentioned, we have our operational assets in Pennsylvania that are our wind portfolio. And then out in New Mexico, we have all of our solar and then one battery that came online last year. And then from there, we have whole teams of people that are, working on anywhere from development to, construction, reconstruction, stuff like that of the existing assets. So this is our commercial team. So we have 8 people on our commercial team, and this is where I'll kind of start to pass it over to Zach. But basically, we have kind of split into 3 functions about, front office, middle office, and back office. So Zach and I are in the bottom left there, and then I will kind of let him explain who does what here.
Hey everyone, I'm happy to jump in and get started. Uh, as Chase was kind of describing, him and I both sit in more of the back office function of our department, but really we are kind of split into 3 different units. Our commercial team is split into a front office, a middle office, and a back office. So as we kind of walk through some of the slides to give you the faces to each of those offices, um, myself and Chase are in the back office. Shu and Larissa work under Justine, and who primarily manages the middle office. And then Andrea and John work collectively a lot of the front office work. But Chase, if you don't mind moving to the next slide, I don't think I can control it from here. So if we can talk a little bit about the commercial front office functions. Generally speaking, what this is trying to do is originate our offtake. So we're looking for opportunities to be able to expand the business, look for opportunities to be able to distribute power or possibly RECs or a combination of those two to various different companies all across the country. It could also be a utility depending on the market. So by utility, I mean something that, the manager of power locally in a specific geographic region. That's kind of what this is trying to do, is figure out, the pricing and market strategies that are most appropriate for each specific contract. This is kind of broken into 4 different areas. So the first thing we're doing is sourcing offtake. So that's kind of going to what I was just saying, looking for energy prospects across the country, understanding each of those areas is like market fundamentals, energy price trends. And then what we're also trying to do is establish long-term relationships with clients. So we're trying to build connections with the Metas of the world, Googles and such to be able to, bring in future business opportunities into the company. Additionally, we're looking for, market evaluation opportunities. So, keeping up with all types of economic and political trends to be able to figure out where, our team can bring opportunities across the country. So if we could just go to the next slide, I'll kind of go into what happens once we actually do have a contract. So the middle office is primarily looking, it will work a lot with the front office, but it's primarily looking for risk management and strategy opportunities. The first thing that we'll deal a lot with the middle office is market interfacing and operations, which is primarily dealing with the support of energy trading across various different markets in the US. So our team will sometimes schedule energy for some of our sites that we own, or possibly do that on behalf of an asset management client if we have a contract as such. We might be looking into specific energy market strategies associated with DART or capacity market strategies. So looking into finding out, ways of increasing revenue based off of other opportunities in the market. Another thing that this office does a lot of is data management and visualization. So we're looking to try to automate a lot of our reporting to give us insights into site performance, um, give us insights into things such as, um, you know, the various KPIs. And then we're reporting a lot of that over to various stakeholders internally and externally. And then also just monitoring for any kind of risks that might be coming up across the market. As an example, we just had a pretty significant winter storm that came across the area a few weeks ago. And we worked very closely with the middle office to be able to calculate what some of the financial and market implications would be to all of our various sites and figure out ways to be able to coordinate that um, and remain compliant with our various contracts. So we'll go into the back office function a little bit more now. So this is the area that Chase and I work in primarily. Although we do work a lot with some of the other commercial functions, this is really our main wheelhouse. And what we're really doing is we're looking at the back end of everything I've just talked about. So we're looking at the actual performance of the sites in terms of market revenues. We're coordinating invoicing with off-takers. So like I was telling you guys about with the front office function of, trying to figure out off-take contract structuring. We're actually doing the settlements with them. So just keeping up with the monthly process, investigating variances to budget that our clients may have, working to onboard new projects. So once we receive maybe a new asset management agreement, or we might receive a new IPP project into the company, we're going to be working a lot to try to figure out, automated, efficient reporting to be able to provide on the sites and report a lot of that to our internal accounting and financial groups. So onboarding new projects here is the first box there. The second is a monthly settlement process. So this is a lot of that invoicing, coordinating with off-takers, remaining compliant with ISO reporting. Another thing we're also doing as well is coordinating rec sales. So in renewable energy specifically, a lot of companies are focused on RECs, which are renewable energy credits. That helps to meet a lot of their internal green energy margins and goals. So we're coordinating that all the time, trying to be able to deliver that contractually to various off-takers. And then similarly, another thing that we do a lot of as well is just variance analysis and revenue reporting. So like I said, working a lot with our internal financial groups to provide company-wide reporting for sites that we might own, or provide accounting and performance reporting for our asset management clients. Just depends on each of the unique contracts that we might have. But I will pass it back to Chase here, just for him to kind of talk a little bit more about him specifically. But if you guys have any questions at all, feel free to throw it in the chat, or we can jump in at the end and answer any questions about all of that.
Great. Okay. Yeah, my career path and kind of my background specifically. So I grew up in Columbus, from Ohio. I went to the Ohio State University. I'm sure you guys have heard of it, being at Penn State. And really, when I was in college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. So I thought I'm going to go into business. I thought it was pretty broad, pretty applicable to, different positions. And I wasn't sure, do I want to go into logistics or marketing? And I thought, well, if I go major in logistics, I'm probably going to work in logistics or, so on. So I majored in finance because I thought that was also pretty broad. And when I was in college, I just wanted to, see what was out there. I ended up getting an internship in Hong Kong in the insurance industry. So then from there, I got another internship the following summer, also in the insurance industry. I wasn't, super passionate about insurance, but that's just kind of where it took me my next best opportunity at the time. So my now wife is from Pittsburgh. She grew up about a half hour outside of Pittsburgh. So here I am after graduation. But I started off working at PPG. If you're from Pittsburgh, maybe you've heard of it. But my first job was actually it was in accounting for them, doing a lot of like cost accounting, kind of, day-to-day operations and stuff on the finance side for a manufacturing plant that's actually based out of Cleveland, for an automotive business unit that they have. And then I did that for about a year, and then I got a promotion working in the corporate FP&A group. And so from there, I was doing a lot with tracking like capital expense projects for the corporate side. I was doing a lot of their environmental reserves. I was doing a lot with external, like the 10Qs, all the financial reports, doing a lot of footnote stuff with those. I did that for a couple years, and then from there, I wound up at Exus, and I feel like it's always, to me, I'm trying to go like, what's the next best opportunity? What am I interested in? What do I need to learn about? So I started off, and I wasn't super interested in accounting. I wasn't good at accounting in college. But I can talk about this later on my next slide. I feel like that was a great place for me to start being interested in finance. And so now really, our role now, especially being at a small company where we're interacting with, the operations group, the accounting groups, external stakeholders, call it, on a daily basis. There's just so much to, talk about and so many things going on with the markets. Our revenue structure is impacted by these contracts that all these sites have for the offtake. And really, it's a lot of a, combination of being involved in different business areas. So my slide on early career advice. Like I said, my first job was in accounting. I got C's in accounting in college. I was not good at it, and I did not want to go into accounting. I didn't major in accounting. And the guy who hired me said, no, 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 listen, I want you to start off in accounting, and trust me, you need to learn how this works and go from there. And it was, instrumental to me to be able to learn, what are the rules? How does this work? How do the financial statements interact? And kind of just get that foundation of, how do the operational metrics lead to financial results, and how do you interpret that? How do you communicate around that? And, learning what to look into and where stuff goes, basically. And I think another thing is something that I maybe struggled with early on in my career was if I was given a project, if I was, put on something that I wasn't super familiar with, I would assume that I had all of the answers. And, if I couldn't figure it out, if I didn't know what data meant what, I would think, well, this is something that I just need to spend more time on. So my advice to anybody would be, you need to give it a good try, and you can learn a ton by just, giving something your best shot and really just spending more time on something and looking into it and figuring out kind of what's connected to what. But also, know when to ask for help. And from there, the more you go, you really learn just how to approach different problems and, who to ask for what help and what your role is and what you can provide versus what can come from somebody else. Um, and my third point here, I just said be proactive in your own career development. I've always been a big fan of the, like, keep your head down and just work hard and, look for the next best opportunity. But that's, you need to focus on where you are currently and do a good job, and, those opportunities will open up for you. You can't be, looking to, network, but you should be targeted and, intentional with your networking and figuring out what you want to do and what you want to go into. And, knowing that you can always change your mind, you can jump around, you can move sideways, diagonally, especially early on in your career, trying to figure out what you're actually interested in. I didn't know what I was interested in terms of, major and what industry to go into and stuff like that throughout college. And um, that's my advice. So yeah. Zach?
Before Zach goes, I just wanted to see if anybody out there has any particular burning questions right now for Chase. You can either, raise your hand in the chat or plug something into the chat under the Q&A. Don't be shy out there. If I could, I'd call on you. I actually, I do. Think of some questions if you guys have some. But I, Chase, I do have a question for you. So you mentioned, you had you started off with two internship positions, and can you talk about, how you went about finding those internships and some of the challenges you faced in that whole process?
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is internships are a big numbers game. You need to apply and apply and apply to so many internships, and really take what you can get as a sophomore was my experience. When you want to, when you have a resume, it's easier to get something else. And when you have something to speak about prior experience, it's easier to go get the next thing, is what I found. So really, if anyone on here is a sophomore, I think my experience is it's a numbers game, and apply, apply, apply to anything that you're remotely interested in. And then, do research on the company, figure out what they do and what you're good at and what kind of skills you can apply if you were to get that role, and then, try to nail the interview. Um, but I mean, I think internships are all about taking, your first step and, figuring out if you're interested in it. If you're not interested in that, you can jump around, you can switch, and then really just try to develop your skills in terms of how, the real world, I guess, call it, works. I think that there's like class work and then there's real life stuff, and there's some overlap and there's not. So, but yeah, I think internships, my biggest takeaway is it's a numbers game and go for what you're interested in. So for me, there was this program through Ohio State, my first one, and I mentioned it was in Hong Kong, I think, but I thought I'm a sophomore, I'm going to go to the most far away place I can, and if it's in insurance, that's great. So I was in Hong Kong for a summer, and then from there, and then once I had that insurance experience, then that led me to get my next internship at AIG doing financial distributions with them. But again, I mean that doesn't mean that I'm married to insurance from there, because then at the time, I was a graduating senior with 2 internships in insurance, and that's not what I went into.
Yeah, but it gave you something to build on.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thanks for that answer. Okay. All right. So here's something in the chat. So it said, love to hear that. I would like to hear from you about your take on this. I've got an offer to return for an internship from my last summer company. If I take another role and not theirs, will that lessen my opportunity to join that company back again? What's the best way to handle that?
Maybe. Yeah, maybe it might. I don't know. I would assume that, if you got a return offer, that means that they like you. But if it's not something that you had an experience in leaving saying, oh, this is wonderful, I love this company, this industry, and this is what I want to do, then use your internships as a trial run, I'd say. And you can try out a company for 8 weeks, call it, and then say, yes, I love this, or oh, maybe I don't, maybe I do. And then you can always go somewhere else and think, oh, actually I did like the first place. So I think, yeah, that's a good question. That's a tricky spot, but a good spot to be in. Um, yeah.
I yeah, I think that makes sense because you get perspective with a second spot. I guess the one thing that I would add would be, to have a conversation with the company that offered you to return and talk through with them a little bit about, is it the same thing that you were doing last summer, or is there an opportunity to kind of expand your experience and your knowledge? So, if if it if it was you doing the same thing that you did last summer and you really loved it, that's one thing. If you didn't like it, then or you weren't crazy about it, maybe there's something else within the company that you could be doing something a little differently. So yeah. Yeah, and we got a comment from Sarah Krupp, who Sarah is part of the she represents the Western Pennsylvania campuses for Penn State in career services, and she said absolutely have a conversation with the recruiter and keep that line of communication open. Because I think the other thing is that if you have that conversation and you express that you really appreciated that, but maybe you want to just expand your skill sets, that's a lot better than if you just turn them down without any conversation, because at least they know you appreciated it, and maybe that door might have closed a little bit, but it's not slammed shut to come back at a later date. Okay, any other questions, comments? Okay, and the student said that helps. Thanks so much. So
Yeah,
uh,
of course.
okay,
On to Zach.
okay, on to Zach. Thank you.
Oh, that's me.
Thanks. So I guess really I'll start off by just putting out some, and I guess you'd say food for thought, but a little bit of an alternative career path to chase. I actually never had an internship. So if anybody has any concerns about having not had an internship at any point in their college journey, don't feel like all of your career prospects are down the drain. You have a lot of opportunities to be able to build up your work experience. So I'll kind of get into some of that. But I graduated from Florida Atlantic University in May of 2022. So just kind of in the I guess you could call the thick of the COVID pandemic at the time. I graduated high school in May of 2019, so it was kind of a pretty short period there in college. But once I had finished, the world was a little bit different at the time. It was a lot harder to find jobs given the status of the economy after COVID. So it was ultimately a game of finding out where opportunities were and just remaining adaptable. But I did get my bachelor's in finance, and I'm assuming most people here are a business major of some sort. So, if you have any kinds of questions about that specifically or why I chose finance, feel free to ask. But the I did a minor as well in business law there at FAU. And then while I was kind of wrapping up college, I actually started working as a mortgage loan officer for a mortgage company based out of South Florida. And I did that for just about 2 years, really because I wanted to gain some experience in the real estate market at the time. So post-COVID, the real estate industry was really just evolving into a totally different animal than it had been prior to COVID. We saw like tons and tons and tons of house appreciation over um, the COVID pandemic. So there were a lot of opportunities to kind of jump in there and be able to, get my, I guess you could say, foot in the door somewhere. So that was kind of my first, I guess you could call it a true professional job. And I actually did that while I was finishing up college. So I went and got my mortgage license while I was in school and began working there. And then at that point, we kind of saw a lot of pushback economically. Rates started getting really high, and really the mortgage industry started to slow. But given I had just finished up my degree at the time, I decided to pursue a little bit more of a traditional finance role. So I actually got in at UPMC, which is, assuming everyone here is in Pittsburgh and knows what UPMC is, but if not, it's a very large hospital institution here. And I got involved in their finance rotation program they had there, which was very, I guess you could call it very interesting compared to a lot of other traditional roles in the sense that it allowed us to be able to work in a different department of UPMC's finance for a year at a time. So it was a 3-year program, and I started off working in physician services and then moved on to the hospital program. So that they have there. So I kind of got a lot of exposure to clinical networks, finance networks, insurance networks. Obviously, my healthcare has pretty much is just such a large industry, and there's a lot of things that are very overlapping. But a lot of my role was still very, I guess you could call it corporate finance, FP&A type focus. So we were doing a lot of analysis to budget, trying to figure out what might be driving variances across departments. I got some exposure to being able to work on, capitalized projects, being able to get involved in some more long-term investment type analyses. So that was some of the fun that was involved in the job there. But while I was working at UPMC, I decided to kind of further my education a bit, and I pursued a master's in financial management. So I got into Boston University's, they had an online program, so I decided to pursue that. And I actually did a specialization in international finance, which I'm now finishing. So it took me a couple of years to do that. But if anybody has any plans on going back for a master's, my biggest advice would be certainly don't rush into it. Really thoroughly think about what you want to pursue. Don't think that just because you're finishing college that you need to go into a master's degree. That is not the career path for everybody. And so if you feel like you need to have some work experience and build up time under your belt before pursuing more education, I think that's also a really great idea. And then I started working with Exus about a year ago, and I got some exposure to a totally different type of industry. This role here, obviously, like I was talking about from some of the back office functions, is very market interfacing. So I've been able to kind of use a lot of my experience from working in real estate with a lot of different parties at one time. Real estate's a very litigious industry. It's very contractual, and there's just a lot of competing deadlines that you have to work in. And so that I think really helped transfer over to my current role. But if you don't mind, Chase, moving to the next slide, I'll talk a little bit more about that. But kind of going into a little bit of what Chase was talking about as well, but I also have some takeaways here for everybody that I kind of have. So I think the biggest thing I'll talk about firstly is adaptability. So having, pretty much did my entire college degree through the pandemic. We were not in a traditional learning style at the time. Everything was remote, and it was just a lot harder to network. It was harder to really, take advantage of the opportunities that people traditionally have had for many years prior to the pandemic. So really, at the time, my main goal was to build up transferable skills that I could use across different industries, and also be able to kind of expand my knowledge beyond the classroom. So that included going for some experience in different industries like real estate and renewable energy, healthcare, and such. But also, another thing I like to do is just constantly be learning. I think it's great to get formal education, obviously, but beyond that, it's also important to just continue to learn. The learning does not stop post graduation. Just because you have a degree doesn't mean you stop learning. I think one of the things that I really enjoyed, so to my own surprise, kind of like Chase's story with accounting, was when I was in school, I had never had really any exposure to computer programming or any kind of script building or automation. And I always thought, okay, that's definitely not for me. I don't like computers. I thought that for many years throughout high school. I was just like a basic Word user, never was like super into computers or anything. I did know some people that were, but I was not one of them until I started working. And I actually was able to get some hands-on experience working with a lot of different tools. And one of the first ones that I started working on was a computer programming software called SQL, which I used at UPMC to be able to do a lot of internal reporting for them. And then I actually started expanding my knowledge through my grad school program and elsewhere. I learned R, which is like a statistics software, so got some exposure there. Python, got some exposure to that as well to be able to work on report automation and scripting. Obviously, Excel is very heavy throughout a lot of finance roles. That was something that I worked on, but I did a lot of reporting, especially in my corporate finance role at UPMC, using Power BI, learning the DAX coding for that. And then obviously over the last couple of years with just the complete boom and explosion of AI, learning a lot of the GPT tools that are out there and kind of understanding some of the fundamentals that affect those tools. I think the biggest thing that helped with learning a lot of these skills was being able to be adaptable, but also able to work a variety of roles. So don't think just because you have a finance role that you have to work in finance for the rest of your life. You can go into an operations role or go into something else that might be a little bit more client facing. So having skills beyond just formal education will help to get your foot into the door, maybe a different career path that might be a little bit more of an alternative one. And then lastly, just lots of networking along the way. So all of my job opportunities to date, I actually have found through LinkedIn. So that was a variety of me reaching out to people directly through LinkedIn, setting up one-on-one type conversations with them to find out more about what might be happening inside a company, what's going on in the job market. So I did not sit around and wait for opportunities to come to me. I really just wanted to find opportunities that were out there. And I think one of the biggest things I learned through that process was just having the face-to-face interaction. It puts a face to the name. It's one thing to submit a job application, but when nobody knows who you are and there's 150 applications for the same role, I think putting yourself out there, being able to put a face to the name and, being a face in someone's mind really does help to get your name to the top of the pile, which was very important, especially through COVID when there just were not a lot of job opportunities at the time due to hiring freezes. But, another big thing that you guys might have noticed was I moved up from Florida. So that was a big change for me personally. So just had to kind of stay adaptable and continue networking to assimilate to a new state, just a new environment, new culture. So that's a little bit about that. I think I did see a question that came in. I'm not sure how to see it, but I saw something pop in. I
Yeah,
don't.
yeah. So there's actually there's two questions. So one, so I don't know. Are you did you want to wrap up, Zach, or you want to go to the question?
Oh yeah, no, I'm happy to take the questions, just kind of open
Oh,
dialogue. So
okay. Okay. And this might be actually for both of you too. So the first one is in terms of minor selection, as an energy business and finance major, what minors would best complement that skill set in your opinion and make me a more well-rounded candidate for an internship job opportunities?
so is the major energy business finance, like is that just
Yeah,
the
yeah. So
okay.
the students an energy business and finance major, and so they're looking for what minors would complement that.
Well, ultimately, I wouldn't be able to speak to what your curriculum is specifically, but I think if there's any kind of minor that might go to that, I think anything contractual, if you can be able to get any kind of exposure. Like for me, I did business law, so I got a lot of exposure to commercial contracts, learning, the Uniform Commercial Code. I got into a lot of the legalities behind that, but I think a lot of that's very applicable. The energy industry is extremely regulated. There's a lot of legislation and political changes that are happening every day that are affecting the energy industry. So I think if you can learn, how to read contracts, how to be able to find opportunities within contracts, and be able to kind of interpret I know the so-called legalese. I think that that's a great minor. I'm not sure how much that touches that. But, I don't know, Chase, do you have any other suggestions in terms of minors?
Yeah, I think that minors are great. Anything math related, statistics, I don't know, physics, anything like that that could help you. I when I was in college, I viewed a minor as what can you be interested in? So I was a neuroscience minor. And I didn't complete it. I didn't want to take my chemistry lab. I thought I would just try to graduate sooner. But I mean, do something you're interested in. If maybe you're not interested in math, then find something that you're interested in. And if hey, I want to go into energy, then find something. Go through the list. I'm sure there's a list of minors through Penn State's college, and think, okay, maybe there is something that is engineering. If you're a business major, maybe you can minor in engineering. If you're an engineering major, maybe you can minor in something business or finance related, and try to find that overlap. If not, if you just want to build your resume, then math. Math is great. Everybody likes math.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
and
that go
oh,
ahead,
sorry.
sorry.
No, no, go ahead, Zach.
No, I was just gonna say I think everything Chase said was very beneficial. I think a lot of times it comes down to what you want to do specifically. I don't think that a degree in anything is anything to pigeonhole you. I think if you have the education, it means that you put yourself through something that was a long-term commitment. And if there's something else that interests you personally that you want to apply to your career, pursue that. Of course, figure out something that is reasonable, but pursue it. I think really there's no wrong decision or wrong answer when it comes to broadening your skills.
Yeah, and Sarah chimed in again just to say, definitely talk to your assigned academic advisor. Usually they'll have great suggestions for minors that complement and also, meet your interests. So, just kind of reinforcing what you both just said. And then also, you can discuss that with your advisor in terms of how that fits into your graduation plan as well. Because, you know, putting on the parent hat too, that was like, well, wait a minute, does that mean another semester? Does that mean another year? So yeah, that's a good thing to consider. There's another question that we have. So the question, and again, I guess this is for both of you. Since joining Exus, how has your scope of work increased as a senior commercial analyst?
You want me to? I guess I could take that first. So I think the biggest thing that has changed over the from my previous jobs was really just kind of a lot of autonomy. I think, in general, when I look back on some more of my previous roles, I think there was a little bit more, what's the word, like, I guess you could call it, hand holding, so to speak. I think this job, in the job title, you're kind of expected to perform at a more senior level. So we have a little bit more autonomy with dealing with clients and making decisions. Of course, we still have to, ensure that we're making, business sound decisions. But, I think that would be the biggest thing that's changed. So, we're kind of trying to figure out solutions on our own a lot more than we are maybe deferring to somebody that has more experience. I don't know. What do you have to say, Chase?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are definitely, call it, stages to being in a role. And there's a lot of different responsibilities that we have, different things that we're involved in. And so maybe depending on what that is and what you're doing specifically, maybe you're at a different stage within that. But when you start a role and you're brand new, maybe you're new to the role, maybe you're new to the company, the industry, whatever it is, you need to have a period of weeks, months, a year or so where you're learning and you're figuring out, how does this work? What do I need to do? And you're kind of going through the motions, figuring out what is this? How do I do it? And then from there you have, okay, now I'm doing it. It's a routine. You really connect the dots, and it's not something that takes 2 months. But really, like after a certain period of time, that's when you think, okay, this is how it works. I understand it. I'm doing it. You do more and more. You take on more tasks, more responsibilities, call it. And then after you get good at that, then you can take that in stride and say, okay, now here's an opportunity for me to improve that. Maybe you improve the process. Maybe you get involved in different projects, different areas, and so on. And so there's different stuff, especially when there's so much to be involved with it at a small company where you're not really siloed into here's one specific area of this business unit that you do. Different stuff that I've done 50 times that I'm improving, and there's different stuff that I've done once that I'm learning a lot about. So I think that you're always kind of in different phases with different areas of responsibility, call it.
Okay, thank you both for those answers. So, all right, we still have a little bit more time if there are other questions out there. I'm looking in the Q&A in the webinar chat. So, does anybody want to raise their hand, jump in with a question? All right, going once, twice. Oh, all right, here we go. So, all right, so here's a question. So, given that Exus is a small private company, what does growth look like within 5 years?
So the good thing about Exis is it's growing. It is growing. There's new sites, there's new, contracts, there's a lot of work basically that needs to be done. And so I think that as the company grows, as there's more and more sites coming into our internal, external, asset management portfolio, it's growing. And so there's opportunities for sure to, grow in terms of your career, but also grow in terms of like what you're exposed to. So even just tying this back to the last question, like our scope of work and our scope of responsibilities has grown in terms of, maybe we start off all of our sites. When I started, I was working primarily with solar sites in Texas, and I did that for a couple months. And then from there, you develop and you grow and you take on solar sites in New Mexico and now wind sites in Pennsylvania. And so you're not only growing in terms of responsibilities, in terms of like a number, but also in, more markets, more diverse types of assets, diverse types of contracts. So yeah, does that answer your question? Any follow-ups?
No, Jack,
Zach?
do you want to chime in on that? And let's see if there's any follow-up.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I guess when I saw the question, I was also wondering specifically what they meant by growth. But if they're talking about just like our internal growth, I think, really what we're trying to do is really find opportunities to build client relationships as much as we can. So, one of the biggest things that we've been seeing over the last year, really 2 years across the energy market is just a very large boom in AI, and that's causing a very large strain on the power grid. So we have a lot of demand there that is going to require energy supplies. So really, what we're looking for are opportunities, for example, with big technology companies across the country. To partner and build energy that they can use to be able to roll out their AI programs and their tech programs and such to be able to meet their own internal goals. But I think that's the thing that's really pushing a lot of growth across our company. Another thing we're also doing as well is trying to figure out opportunities from an asset management standpoint, clients that we can take on that might be able to help us more with, longer term strategy in a market that we might not be as familiar with. So trying to continue to remain adaptable, stay evolving, and really meet the demand that's out there. I don't really think the demand for power from AI is going to be going away anytime soon. So anything that's just going to get stronger. So I think that's really going to be one of the biggest catalysts towards our own internal growth. But if there was any kind of other question about growth specifically, other than that, I'd be happy to answer it. But that would be my interpretation of the question.
Yeah, there's no follow-up to that question, and I think you both answered that. Well, not correctly. I think you're appropriately. I think that covers you covered a lot in that. I would maybe add that, even despite some of the federal policies and just given the leadership in the White House and, this adversarial approach to renewable energy is not going away.
Mhm.
And to your point, Zach, particularly when you got the data centers that have these exponentially high demand for energy, it's going to need multiple sources of energy to do that. So maybe that's one other part of in terms of if they were thinking about if the student was thinking about, well, right now renewable energy isn't a presidential priority, but it's not going away. So
Right. Absolutely.
okay, we do have another question. Do you think interning with a smaller company would allow someone to learn more than to be with a large company?
Um, yeah, I guess I can jump in on that one first. So it's funny. I've actually worked for both. UPMC, I believe, has a headcount over 100,000 employees. I know Chase worked for a company that was quite large. I'm not sure what the headcount was there at PPG, but um, at UPMC specifically, we had a lot of employees, and it was just kind of this interesting situation across the area where everybody's like, "Oh, do you know this person that works for PMC?" I'm like, "I don't." When you're dealing with as many employees as there are, I don't know them. So that is, I would say, like the biggest drawback of working for a large company is you do kind of have a very different culture from the standpoint of you kind of know your own business unit, like Chase was talking about earlier. You'll get to know like your own department specifically, but it's a lot harder to branch out and get to know the other aspects of the company that's, a million miles away. So that's, I'd say were some of the challenges with larger companies that when you're in a smaller company, I think it's easier to be able to build connections with people that are a lot higher up on the corporate ladder than you might be. Um, so I think there's more opportunities there. And then I think, from an internship standpoint, I really don't think it matters where you intern, at least from my point of view. I think any experience is good experience. And, if you find an internship in a company that is very interesting to you, maybe from an industry standpoint or their own growth, or maybe a manager that you want to work under that might have a lot of experience, I think that that's a lot more important than would be just the size of the company. So really good question there, but I don't know if Chase has anything else to add on that.
No, I don't have a lot to add. I think that there's definitely positives and negatives to being at a big company, and same in a small company or anywhere. And I mean, I'll say we had a number of interns last year, and they were all very involved and very visible. Everybody knew who they were. They gave presentations to the whole company at the end of the summer. And I will plug that we have 5 internship spots open for this coming summer that are on the LinkedIn page. So you should go check those positions out. But no, I think that any internship is a great opportunity to just get real experience. And small company, large company, you really can't go wrong.
Yeah, really agree.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. Okay, okay, this is your last chance out there for any more questions, at least live. So I'm not seeing any additional questions. So, Chase and Zach, I really want to thank you for taking the time and sharing your experiences with us. I always learn a lot during these webinar presentations, and appreciate you guys taking the time to share it with the students as well. So, okay,
Absolutely.
it's I don't know where I know we've got students from 7 different campuses, so wherever you are, I hope you have as much sun as we have today as you see the sun streaming in on me as we leave. So thanks everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks.